One of the reasons why I like working with as few layers as possible is because I hate that whole dance of trying to remember or figure out what layer I'm on and trying not to draw on the wrong layer and such. And I will tell you that, just the difference of working with a regular keyboard, it's a little bit easier to just go through and rename all of your layers in Photoshop than it is in Procreate. Of course, I see a lot of people working digitally who don't bother naming their layers or renaming them as they make changes. And I wonder if that's just like an old man prejudice that I have from when I first started using Photoshop and digital programs, like that need to always name every layer so that mostly it was because throughout my career working collaboratively, you have to be able to hand files off to other people and have them be able to make heads or tails of it. So to me, naming those layers was essential. But I mean, I see a lot of people who just work and they're like, they will use a direct selection tool when they're working in Photoshop so that they can just hold down a modifier and just click directly on whatever layer they're working on the same way you would on Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. And they don't really care about naming layers. They just go through and, 10 layers or 50 layers, they don't care. So my approach might just be old world, old man thinking digitally. Yeah, it doesn't look good. It's one of those where I got to zoom out a little bit so I don't start putting details in that just don't read or don't work at this scale. For some strange reason, I decided to give this little angel baby a mohawk and an eye patch. I don't know. It seemed right to me. Is it weird? Yes. But I mean, this whole thing is weird. Jim Luhan in the chat says, I'm here for the razzmatazz. I worked on this piece a little bit during the week, and it's weird because I honestly, like, I thought I could finish this like in just one, maybe two sessions, but it is my nature artistically to go in and just be tweaking and fussing. But I do feel like I'm kind of in the home stretch here, in that I just need really to finish up John Henry Unicorn's face and then repaint the wings. I kind of want to put them on separate layers and repaint them because I feel like the silhouette of the wings, the general shape works for me, but the individual feathers and the way it's on there just feels wonky, and I kind of want to redo it. That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately in terms of like my perfectionist nature and overworking things is the idea of working quicker and just saying, all right, I did it wrong the first time. Now let me correct it. Um, and I feel like that in itself can also be a trap because then you can end up in an endless cycle of just correcting and correcting and changing and correcting. But I'm curious to see if there is a difference between the overworking something because you're constantly making corrections versus the overworking something because you're just going slowly painfully trying to make every line and every shape perfect. Jim says the power of the unicorn compels you. Looking good. Well, thank you, Jim. I'm happy to hear that. Think of me as the Michelangelo to your Pope. I forget which Pope made Michelangelo paint the Sistine Chapel. Like I remember any of the popes. No disrespect to Pope Francis, who just passed. I mean, I didn't know him or anything. We weren't homies. I'm just saying. Um, yeah. And I still have not had a chance to get in and monkey around with my Discord server settings to try and set up that kind of like talk show radio thing where people who aren't like what I need to do is set it up so that all of my existing Discord members who are or patrons have roles so that they maintain access to the sections they already have, and then just set up one channel that's for guests who aren't necessarily patrons, but still, people, you get people who are regular hangers out, live stream viewers that want to just come in and chit chat while I'm drawing. And it's for this simple, selfish reason that way I can talk to you guys without looking up at the screen. I mean, I know the other solution to that is bringing a moderator in, but I feel like having a moderator for the stream is something where if this was like my full time, like if live streaming and YouTubing was my gig, if I was a YouTuber by trade, then yeah, I would probably need a moderator. But we're not at that stage yet. All right, now the one thing that I want to do is I think I want to darken the line work just on John Henry Unicorn. Leave the other cherubs kind of like without hard lines and basically just shadows, but give him a line that isn't necessarily as dark as the black line that you use for the character, but something darker to give him a little bit more contrast to make him pop. So let me go to the line art layer. Let's lasso him and do a little hue saturation adjustment. Whoa. I gotta be careful there with those selections. I went way out of pocket. I gotta go right around this hand and not get the cherub's hand. And now let's just bring this down. I don't necessarily want it to be as dark as the hair of that cherub. Yeah, see, the problem with that is that right now it works in terms of shadows on the figure. It's just the lines themselves that need to be darker. Maybe I just make it just a tiny bit. That's all. Just a smidge. Because the problem is then it started making his shadows too dark. You know what? That's enough. Just a very, very mild adjustment. Get in here and get on this face. Let's get on this face here. And his hair can be darker brown, but not necessarily as dark brown as like this guy, like kind of natural curly dark brown. In fact, I mean the way that you have it here, it looks more like it's kind of like that sand beach color where it's kind of like not quite blonde, not quite gray, not quite brown. So if anything, maybe I have his hair a little bit too dark right now. Let's take this and actually let's see what happens if I lighten it and desaturate it a little bit. And I need to zoom out a little because that is that ongoing problem of just getting in there too close and drawing details that are unnecessary. You know, like the hair color that I'm really seeing now that I'm picturing is I know that he's definitely got a Jim Jones vibe to him, but I'm actually thinking about Chris Pine's dad from Chips. I think his name is John Pine. Who's the yeah Chris Pine's dad? For those who don't know, Chris Pine's dad was the chief on that old show with Eric Estrada, Chips, and that's kind of the hair color that I'm picturing right now. Let me get in here with some black lines and get sort of the glasses frame. Actually, you know what? Not black. Let's just take this. Again, I'm in playing around with different with color and value in ways I haven't before. I'm trying to instead of using black, just using darker versions of the colors. There are some artists who absolutely revolt against the idea of using black in any piece, saying that there is no true black in reality. And as somebody who, mostly drawing comics and is used to pen and ink, you know, I'm all about, using solid black line art everywhere. But this is all about experimenting. It's about artistic growth through experimentation. Jim says the Reverend John Pine Unicorn. Yes. Well, I mean, Jim, we're of that era. I don't even know how many kids, I don't know how many people who are even watching YouTube today even know what the hell chips is. And I'm surprised that they haven't done a reboot of that. of all the series that people could do reboots of. Surprised Chips hasn't been on that list. My wife and I were singing the Love Boat theme song to each other because that's the kind of stuff we do. And I was thinking to myself that, Love Boat would actually be a really good show to do a reboot of. In our celebrity Instagram media culture, the idea of just having a show that's sort of like an anthology of human stories, love stories, and just stories about people's lives every week. But also knowing the way that we tend to change stuff around, that they probably wouldn't make it just a straight sort of comedy. They would make it sort of a dramedy with some sort of weird tones. And then I realized, I don't know out of you guys if anybody has watched The White Lotus. And even though they're not on a ship, the fact that in each season they're in a different tropical resort and there's a different cast, and it has humor, but it's got drama and it's got crime. And I turned to my wife and I'm like, The White Lotus is the new Love Boat. And I think it is. Let's see here. Hey, James is in the chat. Hey, James, how you doing? And by the way, Jim, I just noticed the comment that somehow slipped past me earlier that you threw up about loving the Mohawk eye patch cherub. And you know what? I realized now as I'm looking at this, I don't know why I didn't give him a mouth. I think that I had just finished drawing the eye patch when I had to stop. So I'm going to have to come back to that guy and give him a mouth. If I made these eyeglasses red, all of a sudden he would look like sort of an aging Cyclops from the X-Men, which would also be an interesting look. Let's go light and desaturated. What's interesting about making little changes in value to try and indicate different material is that, generally speaking, in the past, I'd say that the big mistake I have made is that I would try to make value and hue shifts that were too big, too great of a change, and it didn't necessarily read as the whole. It's more like the change in value read like something slapped on top of whatever the object was that I was drawing, instead of having a very subtle hue and value shift. So I'm trying to be a little bit more subtle now, and we'll see how that goes. And hey, Hurting Nomad in the chat says, I thought Dr. Odyssey was a love boat reboot. I like that. And thanks for joining the chat there. I have not watched Dr. Odyssey yet. I've seen ads for it. And it looks interesting. It looks entertaining. I think it's just one of those where we have so many different shows that we're trying to watch. And honestly, my wife and I, it's always kind of it's not a battle, but it's always a level of compromise, because she loves the sitcoms. I love the dark and twisted. And we try to find places where we meet in the middle, whether it's something like, The Last of Us, there's nothing comedic about that, but she does love The Last of Us as well. Or what else have we been watching? Well, again, The White Lotus. But on the other hand, with the sitcoms, we've been running through the entire series of that Fox show New Girl, we're running through that. And oddly enough, neither one of us like Big Bang Theory. We have never liked it. Anytime we've tried to watch it, we have disliked it. But we love Young Sheldon, and we love the spin-off of Young Sheldon, Georgie and Mandy's First Wedding, or First Marriage. And being that I don't know enough about Big Bang Theory, I don't know if them saying that it's Georgie and Mandy's first marriage means that they get divorced and then remarry again, which, given the characters, I could see that because they do really seem like they belong together. Let's see here. James says, I'm good. I'm trying to remember the name of that French sci-fi series I watched a while ago. You'd probably like it. I started watching Moloch the other day, so I'm seeing how it develops. Oh, and James says the show I'm thinking of is Missions. Okay, Missions, French sci-fi series. I'll see if I can find that somewhere. I actually was having a day where I just decided I was going to let myself veg out on the couch and watch a bunch of stuff. And I watched a couple more episodes of Daredevil, Born Again, which I'm really liking. And I watched a movie last night that I had heard a lot of good things about called Strange Darling. And it is a serial killer movie. And the thing that intrigued me is everyone said go into it without knowing anything about it. And I agree with that. So I'm not going to tell you anything about it. But what I will say is my reaction to it was that it was good, but I didn't feel like it was a must-see. It was interesting in terms of being a non-linear narrative. The acting was very good. The premise itself, I felt like the premise really hinged on the non-linear storytelling and not necessarily just on the character themselves. Because, I mean, when I think about it, if you took Pulp Fiction was very, revolutionary. But if you took Pulp Fiction and just put it in sequential order, it would still be a great movie. This movie, if you were to remove the nonlinear aspects, I honestly think it would just be okay. And that to me is sort of like I don't know if I would say it's a check mark against it, but it does make it feel like the structure is the gimmick as opposed to the character and stories on their own being really strong. So I'm not saying it was a bad movie, and I'm not saying you shouldn't go see it. I'm saying I went to see it, and I would give it I'd give it a B, maybe a B minus. Worth seeing. I didn't regret watching it. But this is the thing I was thinking in my head was if I had to, my marker for whether something really is a good movie or not is rewatchability. I mean, there are some movies that are great that I don't want to rewatch. Schindler's List is kind of like on that list, like movies that are amazing, but I'm like, it's emotionally draining. But for Strange Darling, I was thinking if my wife came and said, hey, so I hadn't watched this and it looks interesting to me. I know you already saw it. Do you want to watch it with me again? And if the answer is yes, then for me, that's something I'm like, okay, that was a solid movie. And in this case, I'd probably be like, nah, I'm all right. So not a bad movie, an okay movie, an interesting movie. Let's see. Oh, James says, I never watched Irreversible in chronological order, but I heard it has a different effect. Well, I couldn't get through Irreversible. I started watching Irreversible, and honestly, I I watched probably about 30 minutes of it, and I know that the director has specifically said that the soundtrack was designed to have like these weird audio, not a brown noise, but it was kind of designed so that it had these modulations underneath in the undercurrent of the soundtrack that were supposed to be nauseating and disturbing and upsetting to the audience, because the movie itself is disturbing and upsetting. And it worked too well, because I was watching it and the movie made me nauseous. And I got through the scene in the scene in the nightclub with that that beating, that very graphic beating. I got through that. I got through a couple of the scenes when when the when the main guy's trying to track down the person that attacked his girlfriend, and I just kept feeling nauseous the entire time I was watching it. And finally, I fast forwarded to the scene that kind of the movie is noted for, which the premise of the movie, for those who haven't seen Irreversible, is that it's about a man who goes on to hunt down the person who sexually assaulted his girlfriend. It's about these two guys that I can't remember if they were both, like, it was a throuple, or whether it was just the guy was his best friend, or whether the girl had a boyfriend but then was having an affair with the other guy. The point being is that these two guys go to find the guy that sexually assaulted this woman, and it is known because I mean, it's sick to say famous for, but there's a very graphic sexual assault in the movie. And I fast forwarded only because I wanted to see what was so notable about this. And after watching that scene, I was like, you know what? This movie is just too fucked up. I'm out. And that's saying something, because usually my level for disturbing content is pretty high. My tolerance for it, but I didn't want to watch more of the movie. So Irreversible beat me. That's one of those movies where I was just like, hey, I can't do this one. So had to let it go. Let me see here. I see Paul Pate in the chat. Hey Paul, how you doing? Getting my John Henry Unicorn on here. All right, I'm starting to get a little bit too much with the details in the hair. And honestly, I try generally when I'm working digitally to not zoom in too much. So I need to be able to look at it from a distance and be like, okay, that's about how much detail I need. And I'm going to go a little bit darker here, just so I can kind of accent the underside of the nose. I don't want to go as dark as the frames of the glasses, but I feel like it's kind of, the glasses stand out because of how dark those lines are. So I want to add some other dark lines around the face, just sort of framing it a little bit. Just any place that I think would be a a shadow or a line that kind of really frames the figure, frames the head. I will say that I was doing some digital drawing um, using the charcoal brush pack, that Lane Brown brush pack that I purchased, which continues to be worth its weight in gold every time I use it. And I switched to using like a super, super large brush. And I was thinking about some advice that James Gurney has given about working with as large a brush as possible for as long as possible. And I really found that it made a difference if I could work super, super large brush for most of the piece and then just come in at the end and go to a small brush and just do eyes, mouth, nose, like just facial features. Let's see here. So I'm going to go back here to the glasses, and now I'm going to shift to a slightly warmer hue, and I'm going to push up the light, not quite to white, but a lot lighter. And I'm going to try this for the highlights. So not going full on white highlights, but very light. I mean, actually, if we're going to be real about it, it should be a super bright highlight because he's got this halo around him. So let's see what happens if I blow that out. In that case, I'm going to do the opposite here. Instead of doing it around the edges, I'm going to do it more like it's the center. And this is the kind of thing that if I wanted to be real serious about my craft, I would be drawing this looking at actual reflections, getting some reference, maybe setting some lightly colored, some sunglasses in the sun with a light around them to try to capture how this light would look on lenses. I mean, if I were Howard Pyle, I would go and get some actual orange glasses and I'd be like, I'm drawing this with the exact glasses, with the exact lighting. But I'm not Howard Pyle. So I'm not going to do all that. Now let's just go cooler. And that's the other thing that I try to do is whenever I try to go to a dark color, when I try to go from dark to light, I also try to go from warm to cool. And that really seems to help in terms of not making things feel visually flat if I'm what was I trying to say? If I'm coloring something and I'm just doing a range of values, dark in some areas, light in the others, shifting the hue really helps make those value shifts feel alive. And you can do a less dramatic shift in value if you also shift the hue, because it makes it feel like the object, whatever it is being affected by the environmental light. Because usually light itself is either warm or cool. And so as you move away from that light, you will get a shift as the object returns to its natural color. I mean, that light could be a cool light. And in that case, when you move away from it, the natural color of the object will appear cooler. So it'll still go from warm to cool or cool to warm. The conventional wisdom is shadows are cool and lights are warm, but that's not always true. Ooh, shots fired. Paul says to Jim, what's it like to see a good drawing of John Henry Unicorn? Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, I did not capture, the face is not as elongated as Jim's. If anything, I feel like this is at best like a court reporter sketch of John Henry Unicorn, you know? I mean, Jim is the original, except no substitutes. All right. And somewhere in here, I made a stray brushstroke right on his chest. But fortunately, it's on a layer separate from the it's just on this this line art. So I can come in here, erase this, then just repaint those lines. Just that little part. That's fine. All right. Well, this guy is looking pretty close to done. Let's see here. And Jim says, wait, didn't you just draw one too? Well, Paul, I'm going to have to see your John Henry Unicorn art. Maybe that's what we need to do is all share our John Henry Unicorn fan art. A little bit. Oh, I was wondering. I started scribbling on here, trying to figure out why I couldn't make corrections on top of this hand. These hands, the cherub hands, because they're on top of the ribbon, they are on a separate layer. So when I sketched them in originally, this might be too small for you to see, but when I sketched them in originally, you know, the hands were, you know, when I drew the ribbon on top of the sketch, now the hands were covered up. So I had to put the hands on top of another layer. You know what I want to do is I want to take some of this red from the ribbon. I want to go down to this burning city, and I want to put my brush on a low opacity and paint a lower opacity than that. Paint some of that in here. Bring some of that ribbon color in there just to kind of unite the background with the foreground a little bit. I mean, normally I wouldn't put a color in that's this bright in the background because it'd be kind of distracting. But I'm just trying shit. I undid it just because I didn't want those lines to go all the way to the bottom. I like the idea of it having that bright color, but that bright color fading near the bottom. Double check that I'm on the right layer. You know what? I'm looking at this. I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to hold down the undo because as I look at this, I actually realize the flames get brighter from the ground up. So if I'm going to do this effect, it really should be like this, where it's brighter at the bottom and darker near the top. That is actually what I think will sell the visual concept better. Not that when I say sell the visual concept, what I mean is that this illustration is far from photorealistic, but putting the brighter colors at the bottom where the flames would be the hottest will imply enough of the laws of physics that it'll make it sort of like, okay, the logic of this illustration will seem more consistent and will seem slightly more realistic, making everything else about it that may not be, make you, your mind will hopefully accept the reality of the piece better. Like, you know, it's got its own logic, but that logic does have a slight base in reality. Let's see here. So back to the previous thing, when Jim asked if Paul had just done one, and Paul says, exactly, finally somebody who knows what they're doing. Paul, I want to see your piece because you are too humble, you are brilliant, and I am sure that you did a fantastic one. James says, it could be an interesting experiment to wake up from a dream and draw what I experienced. Believe it or not, there is a history of that in comic books. Well, first off, Little Nemo and Slumberland, I believe, was actually influenced by Winsor McCay's dreams. But more than that, there was a cartoonist before Rick Veitch that I think made something called Rare Bit Fiends. And I think Rick Veitch just took the title and did his own version of it. But the idea was a cartoonist who did exactly what you're saying, had dreams, and then made comic strips of their dreams. I mean, I myself have had very powerful dreams where I woke up and did I had a full idea for an illustration or a comic based on that, and would wake up and sketch from them. My point is not to say, oh, this idea isn't a good idea or someone has already beat you to the punch. I'm saying, yes, please do it. I think a lot of times seeing a work that is similar to an idea you have that someone's already done, I feel like it informs my work and allows me to say, oh, hey, what can I do and how can I exploit this idea in new and different ways? Anyway, Rick Veitch from Brat Pack fame, he did a series called Rare Bit Fiends that was all dream inspired comics. And to be honest, just talking about it makes me want to go and check those out now. But I absolutely encourage you to do that, to give it a try and see if anything interesting comes out of it. Yeah, I feel like now the background doesn't feel like it's just sitting there. Just the fact of bringing in some of the colors that are in the foreground into this really kind of brings it together. So all this piece really needs, I don't know if I'll finish this before the stream, is I want to add a little bit of shadows under the line art on his skin, on John Henry Unicorn's skin. I'm actually going to rename it now because I keep saying I don't name stuff. Let's see here. And I've got Paul's John Henry Unicorn piece here. Oh no, I've got Paul chilling on a couch. Paul, I don't know if you want to. And what's crazy is I go to zoom in, Paul, and I see you chilling there, and then Meta asks me, "Do you want to edit this with AI?" No, I don't want to edit this with AI. But if either of you want to throw in your John Henry Unicorn piece, I can toss that up on the screen if you want me to share with the viewing with the viewing audience. Let's hear. Paul says, "Don't you think if he figured out how to fly, he would have figured out how to give himself a bigger a unit?" And that was actually something I considered. I wasn't sure. I thought it would mess with the composition, but I wanted to do something where I actually had the ribbon like wrapping around like his crotch area, indicating the idea that he was very well endowed. And yeah, that's I actually completely agree with you. That was part of the piece here, and I couldn't think working on the fly of a way to make it work compositionally, but without making the problem is I can make it work compositionally, but it would draw too much attention to itself. It would be so, oh wow, he's got this thing covering him. Obviously, he's got a big Johnson, ha ha ha. And I wanted it to be something where if it was in there, I wanted it to be subtle. And I couldn't work out the subtle while still working in the composition as quickly as I was doing it. If I spent more time on it, I think I could have cracked it. But and I guess Paul asked me if I had to choose, which one would I choose first? I said, well, I'm pretty happy with how I'm built, so I would choose flying. Not to brag on my business. I'm just saying, you ass. All right, let me just add a little bit of extra shadow. That is not as dark as the line art, but darker than the basic flesh tone. Say something like that. And I don't know for sure if I'm going to keep this. This is just me trying stuff out. But I want to see what it looks like if he's got a little bit. And I'm telling you what I think I'm going to do is I'm probably going to take this, and when I'm done, do hue saturation to this as well. Oh, wait, no wonder it looks weird. Just because I have it on low opacity again. Let me erase all this. There we go. I was thinking that it wasn't, I'm like, why isn't this dark enough? Just because I have it on low opacity. And normally painting with opacity and building up is kind of I think the common way to work with digital tools. But I'm trying to work more opaquely as an exercise to get better at picking direct colors. I'm trying to look at stuff and say, okay, this is the color I want. This is the color I'm going to make it. This is the color I'm going to paint it. I'm trying to be more direct with my color choices. Let's see here. All right. For some reason, I'm okay. Let me forward this to my tablet. Wait, first save. And now forward. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth here where in theory I could just open this on my iPad, but I'm not sure if it's going to open up a bunch of other stuff that I don't want opened up while I'm drawing on here if I were to jump out and go to another screen. So it says it was sent, but I don't see it. Oh, there it is. Here, let me move this over so you guys can get a good look at Paul Pate's excellent John Henry Unicorn rendition. I like this. What made me laugh when I first saw it, Paul, was that it actually reminded me of a mix between John Henry Unicorn and all of the images of Adam Scott from Severance. Like it feels like it's Severance John Henry Unicorn. I don't know. Maybe it's just the tie and the haircut, but it feels very much like Adam Scott's character that you see in all the advertising for it. But I like this. This is cool. You know what it is, Paul? I think that Jim is slowly trying to trick us by bringing this up. He's basically trying to build an army of people to just take over and do the cartoon for him. This is his slow. He's trying to get us competitive and saying, "Oh, well, I can do this version of it. Well, no, I can do it better," and get us all competing with each other, trying to see who does the best John Henry Unicorn, and be like, "Well, I can animate a scene better than you can," and it's going to be like Tom Sawyer with the fence all over again. You got to watch Jim. He is wily. He is Wile E. Coyote. I see you, Mr. Lujan. I ain't playing your reindeer games. I mean, I played this one reindeer game, but this is my last reindeer game. No more reindeer games. After this, I'm out. But yeah, I'm basically just kind of in the same way that Jim had has the you know the rim lighting so that the shadows going down the core of his face. Instead, I'm doing dramatic lighting that's going around. That's just coming from really just direct above lighting. In fact, I would say that this lighting is just the inverse of what Jim did, as opposed to a strong light coming from around all sides. He's got this really strong light that's coming from like above. And this is a little bit more challenging for me in that I'm trying to work from zoomed farther out. But anyway, I think you did a fantastic job, Paul. And I think that's the beauty of cartooning is you ask, you know, 10 different artists to draw a character and you'll get 10 very different interpretations. Paul says your creativity is next level. I hope that you're talking to Jim because I cannot accept that compliment. It's too kind and I am too self deprecating. Of course, it's very possible that the self deprecating is just a different form of ego where I'm just trying to get people to keep saying, no, you really are good. And I'm like, no, stop. I mean, keep going. I think it's both. I think that I'm afraid that if I accept actual compliments, then I will stop trying to get better and I'll I'll be high on my own supply. But at the same time, I think I very much tell people, no, stop that because I do actually really do enjoy everyone enjoys compliments. So I think it's probably disingenuous of me to say to say that I won't accept the compliment because low key I totally accept the compliment. I think part of being real with yourself is admitting that you have an ego. You know, I'd like to believe that I'm egoless and it doesn't matter whether I get praise or not, but that's not true. That's not real. That's false. I'm lying to myself. You mean so much to me, Paul. I am indicating the shape of the collarbone with a shadow, which, you know, honestly, low key, I was thinking, huh, I actually really like this, getting in here and indicating the anatomy with shadows instead of line. And I gotta go back up to the line art layer and paint over this ear. Otherwise, it's gonna drive me nuts that it's too light to be on the side of the head. And here's where I have to stop myself from going too far because I really, really, really want to put like shadow on the side of the nose here. But I feel like at this angle with this lighting, I should just let that be. The only thing I think I really need is to add a little bit more tone right here to give the indication of his face turning away. And I need to put some bags under his eyes because he looks like he should have bags under his eyes. Oh, that's what I need. I need a little shadow creeping in the eye socket here behind the glasses. Need that. And then just a little dip here. To give him those bags under the eyes. And by the way, I have not watched Unicornians episode 2 yet, even though Jim dropped it a few days ago. So shame on me for that. It is on my list to do. Hang on. Layer am I on? Oh, okay. Now I got to go back to this shadow layer and erase a little bit out of there. All right, I'm going to leave that alone because now I'm really getting into my perfectionist phase. Yeah, I think the only thing this piece really needs is for me to finish the wings. I think this is pretty much done, except for the wings. I need to repaint those. um, and I think that I'm going to answer some questions. I'm going to just get caught up with the chat, which I think I'm fairly caught up today. And then I'll paint for maybe another 10 or 15 minutes just to get the wings started. And probably by next stream, I'll be done with this and on to something else. But let's see here. Paul says, we are part of the Unicornians. I guess we are drawn into that world. And Jim says, how are you going to take that? You better draw another one. See how he riles us up? Trying to turn us against each other, Paul. We got to stick together. Herman's in the chat. Says, what's good, Jeremy? In chat. Hope all is well. Paul says, I was talking about yours, Jeremy. The ribbon, the naked kids, the little, the naked, the little cupids. Awesome. Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And Herman says, LOL, we should boo you, Jeremy. Who doesn't like compliment? Well, see, I came clean. I admitted it. I was showboating. I was trying to be all humble. And I was like, come on. I can't. I can lie to y'all. I can't lie to myself, which is actually the exact opposite. I think that I'm more likely to completely lie to myself and be honest with you guys. Let's see here. Herman also says, plus, I think your art piece is hardcore. It looks as if to be animated, like the color scheme, or should I boo? Is it, hey, good is good. I wish I got more compliments on my work. Well, I mean, this is all inspired. Jim, so Jim Lujan has an animated series, the Unicornians, which he's running on his YouTube channel. And yeah, this is all inspired by, yes, it is quote unquote my style, but it is stripped down and very flat animated looking because I'm trying to draw Jim's art in my style. So it is definitely more flat and more animated looking than I necessarily draw. And weirdly enough, I think there's a little Aeon Flux, a little Peter Chung in the style. I'm very influenced by Peter Chung. When I first started getting into animation, I was very interested in Peter Chung's work. And for any of you guys who aren't following him on Instagram, he's the creator of Aeon Flux. He has mentorship that I'm not a part of, but he has a mentorship on animation and visual storytelling that he does. And he's been posting excerpts of that for free on his Instagram. So even if you're not in his mentorship, in his classes, he'll still put like a 3-minute or a 5-minute clip of just him talking about a piece of film. And sometimes it's a piece of his animation that he's worked on. Sometimes it's a piece of cinema or a couple of clips, and you hear him lecturing over it about just his ideas about good storytelling and bad storytelling and character dynamics, and how just they are a wealth of knowledge. So Again, highly recommend those. You know, I mean, as long as you guys are here, I know a lot of you guys are into animation. Um, Jim, I don't think I've ever asked you who your animation influences are. Like, I know Plimpton, obviously, you got a chance to work with one of your heroes, and I mean, Bill Plimpton, I think should be anybody who's interested in indie animations, one of their heroes. I mean, he is amazing. Um, for me, when I just in bringing up Peter Chung, it reminded me of just how heavily influenced I was by Aeon Flux. And when I thought I was going to go into animation, Aeon Flux was the type of thing that I wanted to do. So, and I bring all of that up to say, hang on, I'm going to duplicate the layer with the wings, and I'm going to erase the cherub wings so I can come in here and just focus on John Henry's wings and getting those right. But the question I was getting at for Jim and for anyone else who wants to jump in is, are there particular animators that are big influences on you? Because I'll tell you, I love Miyazaki, but I came to Miyazaki, I think probably after I had already decided I didn't think I was, necessarily built to be an animator. And getting some crappy text messages. So while I greatly admire Miyazaki, I wouldn't say that Miyazaki is an influence for me. And I am curious, for starting with Jim, but if anybody else wants to say like, oh, this animator influenced me, I'm just curious, just making conversation. Meanwhile, what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to reshape the silhouette of the wings, because I started adding these little thin feathers coming out, and they just don't feel like they really work. So I kind of want to reshape the whole wing, all of the wings, and really get the shape and the silhouette kind of tightened down. Because if you get a good silhouette going, you can have some janky stuff going on the inside. And I mean, ideally, you don't want any jank. You want something that feels, nice and smooth and well thought out. But sometimes, as opposed to being that planned and organized and efficient in execution, sometimes you just get the details in, or that large dominating form, and have that really strong. And then the rest of the piece is just sort of like, whatever. And in fact, maybe there is something to be said about intentionally having some janky parts to your piece. Having some parts where it's within the detailed, thought out parts, to just have some stuff that is like, if you look at it, you're like, that's not even anything. It's just scribbles. But it's to contrast the highly detailed, highly thought out, highly rendered areas. Because people have pointed out, for some artists like John Singer Sargent, and sadly I can't think of anybody else right now. Sargent's the one that pops in my mind. Well, maybe Rembrandt. But looking at areas that, I shouldn't throw Rembrandt's name in there because I haven't looked at enough Rembrandt work. But looking at pieces that seem highly, highly detailed, and then when you look at elements of it, you realize, oh, there's just really only a little bit of detail in like the face and the hands, and the rest of this is all like just kind of, I don't want to say crapped out, but crapped out. Let's see here. Herman says, I can see that. I buy the full series on Fandango, finishing up the Smallville series soon. Um, let's see here. And Paul also says Peter Chung is awesome. And Herman says, yeah, the Aeon Flux animated series. I bought the DVDs when they released a box set of it in the early 2000s. So that has been how I've watched my Aeon Flux. And I have not gone back and rewatched it for several years. But the fact that I keep seeing these clips of Peter Chung teaching makes me want to go back in and rewatch the series. So I just got to sculpt this a little bit more, get it to what I want. Paul says, I don't know who my animation influence is. My best animation was my last samurai cartoon. It really is just a result of all my influences, I guess. And James says, I'm not sure if I have an animator who influences me since I don't really do animation. I'm not sure about who my influences are. Maybe Kevin Eastman. I don't think about it too much. And Herman says, I was more American animation influenced. I loved intros, the Mighty Orbots. Right there with you, bruh. Love that. In fact, you are the first person I think I have heard mention the Mighty Orbots since I was a child, to the point where I started wondering if I was imagining that cartoon because no one else seemed to remember it. Starcom, I remember, Bionic 6, Galaxy Rangers, G.I. Joe, Pirates of Darkwater, and then manga, Fist of the North Star, Akira, Tekken to name a few. Now, it's definitely influenced by the Rankin Bass, OG Thundercats, and Silverhawks. Yes, those are big ones for me. Thundercats was definitely a huge influence. And I haven't read any of the new Thundercats comic book, but I'm on the newsletter for the writer, Declan Shelvey, because I am a fan of him as just a comic creator in general. And, he's somebody who came into comics as an artist, and he still draws. He still, draws comics. But he's been doing a lot more writing for licensed properties. I think he wrote Marvel's most recent Aliens comic. He wrote, he's wrapping up a Terminator series that he is writing. I want to say that both the Terminator and the Thundercats are for, or I don't know if it's for Boom Studios or Dynamite Entertainment. I want to say that the Thundercats is for Dynamite, but I don't know if the Terminator is also for Dynamite or whether the Terminator is for Boom. Because at one point I thought Terminator was at Dark Horse, so I don't know. This stuff's all over the place. Point being is that he's writing Thundercats right now, and it looks dope. And when I have the time, I will definitely read it. So I guess what I'm doing here is I'm taking this and I'm adding, feathers here, and then I'm cutting out the shape of those feathers, or rather, kind of carving into it. In fact, I think I'm going to come in here and actually let's just. All right, that's what I need is to have this go into a concave shape instead of a convex shape, but I need to put this out more like that. It's just something about that's not working. Oh, because I need to leave a little bit more space in between. But what I want to do is I want to see if I can come in here and just sort of like I don't know. Maybe I just took too much out. Let me go with a small brush in here and just kind of come back in. And I can talk for hours about artistic influences. Let me finish this, and depending on where I'm at, maybe I'll go on a mini rant before we wrap up here today. So now I'm getting into this whole things that I'm not quite happy with and continuing to futz with phase. Yeah, I'm gonna look at the chat in a sec. I'm just like, this is one of those I don't quite know what I want, but I'll know it when I see it type of situations. You would think for somebody who drew an entire, graphics novel series about angels, that'd be better at drawing wings, huh? In fact, who knows? That might, that might. I didn't even think about the fact that Morningstar might be the reason why I even came up with this composition. Like I just went to like kind of a go-to safe space. My buddy Carl Alstetter told me that I had to give up drawing angels and devils because for a long time I had a thing about like I was drawing these sexy, a lot of times artists go through their sexy girl phase. And for me, the sexy girls I was drawing were like angels and devils in kind of like BDSM gear, tying each other up, spanking and whipping each other. And at a certain point, he said, dude, you're running that gimmick into the ground. You got to find some new shit. Although now I told him my new angels, Medusa's Gorgons are the new angels and devils. So, and we're losing Paul. Paul's going to take off, but he said, thanks for the great art and entertainment, Jeremy. See you next time. Have a great Sunday, Paul. Great to see you as always. I see Dylan in the chat. Hey, Dylan. Herman says, I've been collecting books, trying to get back into the influence. I have the background artist book for the Ghibli movies. Ron Garney, or it says Ron Gurney, and I think you mean James Gurney. Ron Garney is a comic book artist, and then James Gurney is the guy who has all the painting books. Or maybe there is a guy named Ron Gurney. I might be speaking out of turn, and there may be an animator art educator named Ron Gurney. I don't know. You can clarify and let me know. But books on painting and color and anatomy books for character design and animation. Dylan says, in terms of my angel devil thing, he says, kinky. He's laughing my ass off. Well, you know what? I mean, we all go through, phases. And, I mean, honestly, here's the thing. I definitely think that adult content belongs for adults and not for kids. But, human sexuality is a huge part of the human experience. And I think that there's, a lot of interesting art to be made dealing with the topic. I'm quiet because I'm trying to pick just the right color of gray, because I don't want one that's too dark, but I also want it to be slightly more saturated, like it's taking on the color of the sky. So I'm slowly moving around the color wheel, trying to find a gray that's close to white, slightly darker, but clearly also a cool gray, definitely with some blues in it. And it's kind of a trying to find just the right color. And I think that's it. And I am going to make a clipping mask so I can just paint directly on here without having to worry about changing the shape, or like without having to worry about staying within the lines or making making selections. We go to a bigger brush here. And I think I'm going to go a little bit darker at the edges of this once I paint all this gray in. Now, see, I didn't really know how this phase would go. As I'm starting to block this in, I'm feeling like, okay, this is definitely working for me. I may not finish this on the stream only because I have other stuff to do, but I think that this will be done today because all I need to do is what I'm doing right here, but add it to the little wings of the cherubs. See, I see Chris is in the chat. Hey, Chris, good to see you. Yeah, Herman says, right, James Gurney, the painter. Yes. Well, I mean, I bring it up not because because I'm like, oh wait, let me correct, because I wanted to make sure that there wasn't another educator with a similar name that I hadn't heard of, because what I have not heard of can fill volumes, can fill libraries. So I always try to, not presume that what I think is the answer is the answer. All right, I do need to carve a little bit out. In fact, what I need to do is leave a little bit of a path here so that it's like, really, this is like drawing hair. In fact, that is a really good way to look at it. How you can leave kind of a ribbon of light going through hair where you'll draw it, then there'll be a bit of a highlight running through. Yeah, I think this reads better if I leave that chunk. If I have that little path going through there. Herman says, you good. My spider fingers move too fast when typing on the phone. And hey, Gary Hodges in the chat says, hello, Mr. G, listening while I draw. Good to talk to you as always. Gary, I hope that I am pleasant and soothing in your ears today. I'm going to wrap this up shortly. Honestly, now that I'm this close to being done, I'm one of those people who I feel momentum building when the closer I get to being, finished with the piece. I start getting that same fevered excitement that you get when you're starting a piece. I feel that same thing when I'm putting on those last couple of finishing touches where I'm just like, oh, I can bring it in for a landing. It's gonna make it. So it's very, very exciting for me to be this close to the end. So I'm just going to paint the other wing and then I'm going to call it for today. And if I forget next week, remind me and I can show you the finished piece, but I'm going to finish it If not tonight, then finish it over the weekend. But we were talking about influences, and I have a whole like I had intended to put together a formal video walking through my influences because I can I've thought a lot about the artists that influence me, and it's like I've got sort of a mental map charting my periods of development and growth. So my influences come in three phases. The first is me coming into comics. Now, these are not animation influences. This is just my comic book influences. Because if we talked about animation and art in general, this would be a much longer conversation. It wouldn't be something I could just rattle off. It would be like I'd have to sit there and think very deeply about all of the things that have influenced me throughout my life, because everything that we see and all of our life's experiences are our influences. But when I first got into comics, it was John Byrne, Walt Simonson, Frank Miller, and Howard Chaykin. And John Byrne was the one who really pulled me into like seeking out a comic book shop instead of buying comics on the newsstand. Because most people, it was either Fantastic Four or most people were drawn to John Byrne from his X-Men run. A lot of people were drawn by his Fantastic Four or his Superman, his Man of Steel run, which I still have not read. It's on my list to do, but as you guys know, that's a long ass list. But for me, it was Marvel's West Coast Avengers series that he did, which the whole Vision storyline that's in WandaVision came really out of that run. And I had been reading it. I missed on the newsstand. I missed a couple of issues, and I was just like, I can't miss this. I gotta get the rest of the series. And that led me to seeking out the local comic book retailer in my town. And once I found that first comic shop, it was like it was all over for me. The beast had its claws in me. But that also is how I got introduced to Walt Simonson, because when I went to that shop, one of the things they did is they held a weekly raffle. And one of the prizes I won, the first time I won anything in their weekly raffle, I won a copy of the very first Epic comic, Marvel's Epic Comics imprint. I won the very first version of Walt Simonson's Star Slammers. And to this day, that book to me, I think I love it more than like Star Wars: A New Hope. Like it was like that for me on paper. It was just so fully fleshed out and sucked me in, and I loved it. Then I think reading comics for a while, I can't remember when Frank Miller came into play, because it was one of those things where I would just read articles and people were always talking about Frank Miller. And I think I actually came into comics not long after Batman Year One had been published. So I think Dark Knight Returns had already been out. Batman Year One, I think, was out. Because I think I remember picking up something that was not Frank Miller. It was A Lonely Place of Dying, which is the fallout from Jason Todd's death. And in that book, the point being is I'm just using that to mark where it was. So I can remember what I experienced in Frank Miller first. It might have been that I found reprints, or maybe the first graphic novel that had come out of Frank Miller's the Wolverine series that he drew, that Chris Claremont wrote. Point being was that he obviously had already started casting a large shadow on the comics industry, and I was seeking out his work because of the influence he was having. Like when you hear other artists talking about an artist, I'm like, oh, well, let me check this guy out and see what's up. And what was up was dopeness. Um, and I would say the same was true for Howard Chaykin. Although oddly enough, when I first started finding him, it was finding his stuff that he was a writer on. Because I think the first thing I bought of his was and this was, I think, because I couldn't find a lot of books that he had drawn when I was getting into comics. But the Iron Wolf series that he wrote and Mike Mignola drew. And there's another thing that Mignola drew. I think it was Farfred and the Grey Mouser, which was another epic comic. An adaptation of a Fritz Lieber fantasy series. And I've never read the Fritz Lieber books, but I loved the Howard Chaykin adaptations. I don't think I really got around to actually seeing any of his art until I was able to find his Black Hawk series, and then and some of his work on The Shadow. But he has, I eventually was able to get a hold of copies of American Flag, and even though I should not have had them, copies of Black Kiss and other works that he's done. But those, when I first got into comics, those four, there's that whole, people talk about having your comics Mount Rushmore, the ones who are like the forefathers of your comic experience, not necessarily of all comics. And for me, my Mount Rushmore is Byrne, Simonson, Chaykin, Miller. And I don't think that's particularly revolutionary, because I think a lot of people would say that, they might argue about the order that they would be on that Mount Rushmore, but I don't think anyone would necessarily say that any of those people don't belong on it. I mean, unless you're somebody who came into comics in the golden age, and then you might be like, even for these, not golden age, for silver age comics readers, even that list might be too contemporary. But I think for a lot of people now, for a lot of younger people who maybe, people in their 20s or 30s may not have grown up reading any Miller, Chaykin, Simonson, or Byrne comics. So, all right. I think it is time to wrap up here with this session. I'm going to take a look at the comments real quick. By the way, hit that like button. If you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you know somebody who you think just enjoys listening to artists ramble on about stuff while they're drawing, share it. If people don't have enough rambling going on in their ears, then it's that's what I'm here for. I'll go back a couple and it's hard to find a balance with these wings. All right, let me check those comments, and then we will close it out for today. But yeah, I'm a lot happier with these wings, and I'll get this finished, and I'll be sending it to Jim. All right. Herman says, yeah, Jeremy, still make the influence video. That would be great. Also, when will we have the art get together and sketch online so I can set a PTO day to chill and sketch for that day? You know what? I'd rather know when you have your regular days off, because I don't want anyone else taking their day off just to sit around with my ass. Even though I do have, day job work. I'm doing freelance design work, so my schedule's a little bit more flexible, and I'd rather, I don't know, the idea of making other people take days off from work doesn't sit well with me. I don't like messing up other people's schedules. I pick every Sunday because it's the time that I can be the most consistent. Um, but I mean, hell, honestly, if you have Sundays off, then maybe I can schedule it for a Sunday and just, make sure that my family stuff is taken care of beforehand, so I could do a longer session on Sundays versus doing just an hour or 90 minutes the way we usually do here. Herman says John Byrne is one of my favorite artists, and Buscema. I said I probably chopped his name up. I can't, I probably can't spell it off the top of my head, but it's John Buscema. Some people call it Buscema, but I've never heard it pronounced I've mostly heard it pronounced as Buscema. But anyway, James says, it's funny because I bought some figures from a local comic shop when I was a kid. I started a pull list in the mid to late 2000s when one of the employees remembered me from when I was smaller. Said I was reading volume 4 of Ninja Turtles at the time. Peter Laird was the writer and Jim Lawson did the pencils. I've heard the name Jim Lawson, but I'm not super familiar with him. But yeah, I mean, Ninja Turtles is a pretty long running series. They've had a lot of great artists on it. I've actually never read the original Eastman and Laird, like beginning ones. And because I've been interested in The Last Ronin, and I can get that from my library, I've been tempted to kind of, as a bookend, read like the first couple of issues of the original Eastman and Laird and then read Last Ronin. But I mean, Turtles have always been around in comics in some way, shape, or form for, I think since they started publishing. I don't know if they've ever stopped. I mean, they've had different artists, different creative teams. I think Jason Aaron is writing it right now, which is really interesting. I mean, I like the idea of bringing over somebody who did a lot of mainstream, like Marvel DC work, and now he's coming over to something that is arguably smaller in comics, but more mainstream than, like, I think the Ninja Turtles are right up there with like the Justice League and Batman and Superman in terms of cartoon, in terms of entertainment properties. I mean, they're, who knows? Maybe the Ninja Turtles have even sold more toys. Let's see here. Dylan says, has anyone watched the new Netflix anime Devil May Cry based on the game? I have one episode left and I'm enjoying it. I have not watched it yet, but the game always interested me, and I've never played the game either, but it was one of those games that almost got me to buy a PS2. I mean, I've said this before. I love video games, but I don't play them. I can't keep a console in the house because I won't get any artwork done. Although I'll tell you something else that interests me. And I can't remember if I talked about this on the stream or whether I've just been talking with people in the Discord for the Patreon. But I watched the cinematic trailer for Marathon, the Bungie game. And it was animated by Alberto Miego, who he's animated. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did talk about this in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, he's animated a couple of shorts for Love, Death, and Robots on Netflix. He had a Academy Award-winning animated short called The Window Washer that he did. And he also did a lot of early visual development on Spider-Verse. There's a bit of controversy in terms of how he ended up leaving the project. But a lot of the stuff that he originally established really, I think, framed the look of that series. Point being, the animated cinematic trailer for the game Bungie game Marathon, it's like an 8-minute short film, and it is fantastic. And it makes me angry that I can't play first-person shooter games because I get motion sickness when I watch. I can't do it. Like, I can play them for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I will get kind of nauseous. And if I push it and say, well, let me just play for like a half hour or 40 minutes, if I push it, then I get like blinding migraines and have to lay down on the floor like it's really, really bad. So I've just never really like Call of Duty, Halo, all those games. They look visually cool, but I can't play them. So, which again, I could play Devil May Cry. I just don't because I want to make comics instead. But I do think it's really cool. Let's see here. Herman says, I did hit the like. Thank you. And he says, it's 5 of us here. Sorry for not for throwing us under the bus. And I see your schedule on here. I'm not going to throw that on the screen, but I will make note of it because I'll try to figure out a good time to do a stream. Let's see here. You said if it's Sunday, just let me know ahead of time and I can take time off. I have enough PTO. I'm always working. Like, oh, so you got to work Sundays? You got to go to work later today? I mean, yeah, if you have days off during the week, then but no, it looks like you keep a pretty busy schedule, man, which is good. Keep that money coming, earn that paycheck. Let's see here. All right. On that note, let's bring it in for a landing here. And if you enjoy these live streams, you'd like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber. Head over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you sign up for my free monthly newsletter at substack.com/@Jeremy. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It's a standalone psychological thriller about a man he is cursed with visions he cannot control. Or you can pick up my most recent project, Morningstar. It's a retelling of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It was an 8-issue comic book series and it's collected in 2 volumes. Issues 1 through 4 are in volume 1. And the conclusion, issues 5 through 8, are in volume 2. All right, guys. Again, thank you for the great conversation, the great comments, for hanging out. We went long today, but it was because we were having fun. All right, that's it for now. Go be creative.